The avoidant rejects you with language that sounds final and definitive. They communicate clearly that they do not want relationship, that they need space, that they have decided to end things, that they are moving on, and you should do the same. The rejection feels absolute, unambiguous, like door closing with finality that leaves no room for misinterpretation. You hear the words they say, accept that they mean what they communicate, begin the painful process of letting go of someone who has told you explicitly that they do not want you. And then the avoidant becomes confused, hurt, or even angry when you actually respect their rejection. They expected you to respond in specific ways that their words did not request, wanted you to do things their explicit rejection suggested you should not do, needed you to pursue despite being told to stop pursuing. The disconnect between what they said and what they wanted you to do reveals the fundamental contradiction at the heart of avoidance psychology. They reject you because intimacy terrifies them, but they need you to refuse that rejection, because your pursuit is what makes the terror manageable enough that they can tolerate proximity without being consumed by panic. What the avoidant wishes you would do after they reject you has nothing to do with respecting their stated boundaries or honoring their expressed desires. It has everything to do with maintaining the specific dynamic that allows them to feel wanted without having to risk genuine vulnerability, to keep you invested without having to show up consistently, to preserve the power imbalance that makes relationship feel safe enough to continue attempting. The avoidant's secret wishes after rejection serve their defensive system rather than representing authentic desires for intimacy, and understanding what they wish you would do is understanding the manipulation embedded in their entire relational strategy. The avoidant cannot directly ask you to do what they wish you would do, because asking would require acknowledging that their rejection was not genuine ending, but test designed to confirm your investment. They need you to pursue without being asked, because pursuit that requires requesting is not authentic proof that you care enough to override their withdrawal. So, they reject you clearly, and then silently hope you will ignore that rejection, will refuse to accept their stated boundaries, will demonstrate through continued pursuit that you value them more than you value respecting their explicit communication about what they want. This creates an impossible situation where you are supposed to somehow know that their rejection means the opposite of what it states, where respecting their words is wrong response, and violating their stated boundaries is what they actually need, where the only way to win is to refuse to play by the rules they explicitly established. Understanding what the avoidant wishes you would do after they reject you reveals the depth of their psychological dysfunction and the impossibility of having a healthy relationship with someone whose entire attachment strategy requires you to disrespect their stated desires in order to give them what they actually need. Number 1, they wish you would pursue them harder to prove their rejection cannot make you give up on them. The avoidant's deepest wish after rejecting you is that you would refuse to accept the rejection, would pursue them with increased intensity, would demonstrate through your persistence that their withdrawal cannot make you stop wanting them. They need evidence that you value them enough to override their explicit statement that they do not want you, that your investment is strong enough to withstand their attempts to push you away, that you will fight for them even when they are actively fighting against you. This pursuit serves critical psychological function for the avoidance defensive system. The avoidant rejects you because intimacy with you activated their attachment wounds, and their nervous system determined that creating distance was necessary for their psychological survival. But the rejection simultaneously activates their abandonment wound, the core belief formed in childhood that they are fundamentally unlovable, and that anyone who gets close enough to see them clearly will eventually leave. The rejection is a test designed to reveal which fear is more accurate: the fear that intimacy will destroy them, or the fear that they are unworthy of being loved enough that someone would stay despite their patterns. Subscribe to understand the psychological testing that happens when avoidants reject people while secretly hoping the rejection will be refused. Your pursuit after their rejection provides evidence that contradicts the abandonment wound. If you continue investing despite their explicit statement that they do not want you, if you refuse to give up despite being clearly told to move on, if you demonstrate through persistent effort that their rejection cannot eliminate your desire for them, the avoidant can tell themselves they must have value that transcends their unavailability. Your willingness to disrespect their stated boundaries becomes proof that they matter, that they are worth fighting for, that their abandonment wound is wrong about them being fundamentally unlovable. But your pursuit also serves the avoidant's need to avoid genuine intimacy. As long as you are pursuing them through their rejection, the dynamic remains unequal in ways that keep the avoidant safe. They can feel wanted without having to reciprocate that want, can experience being valued without having to risk vulnerability, can know they matter without having to show up consistently. Your pursuit maintains the power imbalance where they care less, where they hold control, where they can determine when and how much closeness happens, based on what their nervous system can tolerate, rather than having to meet you as equal. The avoidant wishes you would pursue harder, because your pursuit allows them to have the emotional benefits of being wanted while maintaining the defensive distance that keeps them psychologically safe. They can reject you to manage their intimacy anxiety, while your refusal to accept that rejection manages their abandonment anxiety. They can have both protection from vulnerability and evidence they are lovable, both control over the dynamic and proof they matter to someone. Your pursuit gives them everything they need without requiring them to risk anything genuine. When you do not pursue after their rejection, when you respect their stated boundary and actually move on, the avoidant is confronted with the abandonment wound they were hoping your pursuit would contradict. Your acceptance of their rejection feels like confirmation that they were right to believe they are unlovable, that anyone who truly knows them will eventually choose to leave, that their core unworthiness is accurate rather than distorted belief requiring challenging. The avoidant experiences your respect for their stated wishes as abandonment, as proof they do not matter enough for you to fight for them, as evidence supporting every negative belief they hold about their own value. This is why the avoidant often becomes angry or hurt when you actually respect their rejection. They are not angry because they genuinely wanted you to leave and you did. They are angry because you failed the test they needed you to pass, because you did not prove through pursuit that their abandonment wound is wrong, because you demonstrated through respecting their boundaries that they do not matter to you in the ways their defensive system needed you to demonstrate you care. Your healthy response to their rejection triggers the exact wound the rejection was designed to have you disprove through pursuit. Number 2, they wish you would make them feel guilty enough about rejecting you that they can frame reconnecting as their sacrifice rather than their need. The avoidant wishes you would respond to their rejection with visible pain and distress that makes them feel guilty about hurting you, but not so much pain that they feel overwhelmed or responsible for damage beyond their capacity to repair. They want just enough guilt to position any future reconnection as them being generous and sacrificial, by returning to alleviate your suffering, rather than them returning because their own needs drove them back to you. This wish serves their ego and allows them to maintain narrative that they are the strong, independent one, doing you favor by remaining in your life. When you respond to their rejection, with dignity and self-respect, when you accept their decision without falling apart or demonstrating that losing them has destroyed you, the avoidant is deprived of the guilt they need to frame themselves favorably. If you are fine without them, if you move on successfully, if you demonstrate that you will survive and even thrive despite their absence, the avoidant cannot tell themselves they are so important that leaving you was cruel act, requiring their return to repair. They cannot be the generous one who comes back to rescue you from suffering if you are not actually suffering in ways that require rescue. The avoidant needs you to suffer just enough that reconnecting can be framed as them being compassionate and caring, as them choosing to return despite not needing you because they recognize how much you need them. This framing protects their ego by positioning them as the person with power and agency, rather than the person whose patterns drove them to reject someone they actually need. It allows them to return, without admitting they made a mistake, without acknowledging they destroyed something valuable, without facing that their rejection was driven by dysfunction, rather than legitimate assessment that the relationship was not working. But the guilt the avoidant wishes you would create must be carefully calibrated. Too much visible pain and they feel overwhelmed by responsibility they cannot manage. Too much demonstration that they hurt you deeply and they must face that their patterns cause genuine harm to people they care about. The avoidant wants you to be sad but not devastated, hurt but not destroyed, missing them but not falling apart. They want enough distress to feed their ego and justify future reconnection, but not so much distress that they must confront the damage their defensive patterns create. When you fail to provide this calibrated response, when you either demonstrate that you are completely fine without them, or that you are so damaged by their rejection that it overwhelms them, the avoidant cannot use guilt to frame reconnection favorably. If you are thriving, they cannot rescue you. If you are destroyed, rescuing you requires admitting their patterns caused destruction they may not be capable of repairing. Either response eliminates the specific guilt-based narrative the avoidant needs to maintain their ego while returning to you. This wish reveals the avoidant's need to avoid genuine accountability while still feeling like a good person. They want to reject you without taking responsibility for that rejection, being harmful choice, want to return without admitting they made a mistake or that they need you more than they want to acknowledge. Want to be seen as generous and caring while acting from pure self-interest. Your visible but manageable suffering after their rejection allows them to maintain all these contradictory self-perceptions simultaneously. To be both the person who rejects and the person who magnanimously repairs the damage that rejection caused. Number 3. They wish you would remain available as backup option, while they explore other connections that might require less vulnerability. The avoidant wishes you would accept their rejection, not as permanent ending, but as temporary pause, while they test whether they can find someone else who provides what you provided without triggering the intimacy anxiety you activated. They want you to wait in the background, available if their search for easier connection fails, maintaining enough investment that returning to you remains option. They can exercise if other attempts at relationship prove equally uncomfortable. This wish serves their need to never fully commit to any choice, to always have escape route from whatever situation they are currently in. The avoidant rejects you partly because they believe the problem is specific to you and your relationship, rather than located in their own attachment patterns. They think that with different person or different circumstances, they could sustain intimacy without the overwhelming anxiety that closeness with you generated. They want to explore these other options while keeping you available as backup. As known quantity, they can return to if their belief that the grass is greener elsewhere proves incorrect. This wish explains why the avoidant often maintains some level of contact after rejecting you. Why they respond to your messages even while claiming they need space. Why they keep communication channel open even as they state they do not want relationship. The contact serves to keep you invested, to prevent you from fully moving on, to maintain your availability as option. They might want to return to, once they discover that their patterns follow them into every connection, and that changing partners does not eliminate the anxiety that genuine intimacy generates. The avoidant wants you to interpret their maintaining contact as sign they care about you and want you in their life, even if relationship is not currently possible, as evidence that the connection matters enough that they cannot bear to fully let you go. But the actual function of the contact is strategic rather than emotional. The avoidant is hedging their bets, ensuring they do not close door completely in case opening it again becomes necessary, when their current strategy of seeking easier connection fails to produce relationship that requires less vulnerability than what you were asking for. When you refuse to remain available as backup, when you establish clear boundaries that their rejection means complete disconnection rather than maintaining friendship or casual contact, the avoidant loses the safety net they were counting on. They must face that exploring other options means actually losing you, that they cannot have both the freedom to pursue connections that might be easier and the security of knowing you remain available if those connections fail. This binary choice is terrifying for the avoidant because it requires commitment they are psychologically incapable of making. The avoidant who discovers you will not remain available, as backup often becomes angry or accuses you of being rigid or unforgiving. They frame your boundary as punishment rather than appropriate protection of your well-being, as evidence you never really cared, or you would be willing to maintain connection even after they rejected you. This framing obscures the reality that maintaining availability as backup while they pursue other people is not friendship or caring. It is enabling their pattern of never fully committing to anyone, while ensuring they always have options to fall back on when commitment-free exploration fails to provide what they need. Number 4. They wish you would take responsibility for the relationship ending so they can avoid accountability for their patterns causing the failure. The avoidant wishes you would respond to their rejection by accepting blame for why the relationship did not work, by acknowledging your shortcomings or mistakes that made their withdrawal necessary, by positioning yourself as the problem that drove them to reject you rather than their attachment patterns being the actual barrier to sustained intimacy. This wish serves their need to avoid confronting that their defensive system is what destroyed relationship, that their inability to tolerate vulnerability is what made connection unsustainable, that they are rejecting you not because you are inadequate, but because they are incapable of sustaining intimacy with anyone without extensive therapeutic work. The avoidant frames their rejection in ways designed to make you question yourself and internalize responsibility for the ending. They suggest you were too demanding, too emotional, too invested, too much in some way that made relationship untenable. They imply that with someone less intense or more understanding or more patient, they could sustain connection successfully. They position their rejection as reasonable response to your unreasonable expectations, rather than as their defensive withdrawal from intimacy that triggered their attachment wounds. This framing protects the avoidant from having to face that they are the problem, that their patterns are destructive, that they destroyed something potentially valuable because they cannot tolerate the vulnerability that genuine connection requires. If you accept responsibility for the ending, the avoidant can maintain their self-image as someone capable of relationship who simply encountered the wrong person. They can continue believing their patterns are justified responses to others' flaws rather than severe attachment. Dysfunction requiring therapeutic intervention. The avoidant wishes you would internalize their framing and spend energy after their rejection, analyzing what you did wrong, what you could have done differently, how you could have been more patient or understanding or less demanding. They want you focused on your inadequacy, rather than recognizing that the relationship failed because they cannot sustain intimacy, that your needs were reasonable, and their inability to meet those needs is their limitation, rather than your fault, that being rejected by someone with severe attachment wounds says nothing about your worth and everything about their capacity. When you refuse to take responsibility for the ending, when you maintain clarity that the relationship failed because of their patterns rather than your inadequacy, when you recognize their framing as defensive deflection rather than accurate assessment of what went wrong, the avoidant is forced to confront reality they work hard to avoid. They must face that they are destroying relationships through their own limitations, that their patterns are the problem, regardless of who they are with, that changing partners will not eliminate the anxiety that intimacy generates, because the anxiety is located in their attachment system, rather than being response to specific people. This confrontation is unbearable for most avoidants, which is why they become defensive or angry when you refuse to accept blame for the relationship ending. They need you to be the problem, because if you are not the problem, they must be the problem. And being the problem means facing that they need to change rather than simply finding someone more compatible. The avoidant's entire defensive system is organized around avoiding this exact realization, which is why they wish so desperately that you would accept responsibility that actually belongs to them. Number 5. They wish you would demonstrate that you still care about them, despite their rejection, so they can feel wanted without obligation to reciprocate. The avoidant wishes you would continue showing care and concern for their well-being after they reject you, would check in on them periodically, would demonstrate through your actions that you still think about them and want good things for them, even though they explicitly stated they do not want relationship with you. This wish serves their need to feel valued and wanted without the terror of having to reciprocate that care, to know they matter to someone without having to show up consistently, to receive emotional support without the vulnerability of needing to acknowledge they need support. The avoidant cannot directly ask you to continue caring after they reject you because asking would reveal that the rejection was not about genuinely not wanting you, but about needing distance from the intimacy you represented. They need you to offer care without prompting, because unprompted care is evidence that you genuinely value them, rather than performing care to maintain connection or get something in return. The spontaneous demonstration that you still care despite their rejection feeds the avoidant's ego and contradicts their core belief that they are unworthy of sustained care and attention. But the care the avoidant wishes you would provide must come without any expectation of reciprocity or any suggestion that caring entitles you to their presence or attention. They want you to care in ways that cost you emotional energy while requiring nothing from them, to invest in their well-being while accepting they will not invest equivalently in yours, to demonstrate your value of them while they demonstrate no equivalent value of you. The one-sided nature of the care is essential, because reciprocal care would create intimacy the avoidant rejected you to avoid. When you establish boundaries after their rejection that include not continuing to provide care or check in on their well-being, when you treat their rejection as ending that eliminates your investment in them, rather than as pause that maintains your concern for them, the avoidant experiences this boundary as cold or cruel. They are hurt that you are not continuing to care despite them being clear they do not want relationship, are confused that you interpret their rejection as reason to stop investing in their well-being, are angry that you are treating them exactly as they claimed to want to be treated. This response reveals the contradiction at the heart of the avoidance wishes. They want you to ignore their stated boundaries and desires when ignoring them serves the avoidance needs, but they want you to respect their boundaries, when respecting them protects the avoidant from intimacy. They want care without reciprocity, investment without obligation, evidence they matter without requirement that they show up. They want all the benefits of being in relationship with none of the costs that relationship demands. The avoidants wish that you would continue caring after rejection demonstrates their fundamental orientation toward extracting value from others while providing minimal value themselves. They are comfortable with profoundly unequal dynamics where you give and they receive, where you invest and they benefit, where you demonstrate your care while they demonstrate only that they are willing to accept your care, as long as accepting it requires nothing vulnerable from them. Your refusal to participate in this unequal exchange is your refusal to enable the avoidance belief that they can have intimacy without vulnerability, connection without reciprocity, care without having to care equivalently in return. Number 6, they wish you would wait for them to be ready rather than moving on with your own life. The avoidant wishes you would suspend your own life and wait for them to complete whatever internal process they claim to need before they can be in relationship, would put your needs and desires on hold while they take all the time they require to work through their issues, would demonstrate through waiting that they are worth postponing your own happiness for however long their readiness takes to develop. This wish serves their need to control the timeline of intimacy, to ensure relationship happens only when their nervous system can tolerate it, to avoid the pressure of someone else's needs or desires influencing when they must show up. The avoidant frames their rejection as being about timing rather than about fundamental capacity. They suggest that they want relationship but cannot do it right now, that they need time to work on themselves before they can show up properly, that if you would just be patient, they could eventually become the partner you need them to be. This framing positions waiting as the loving and supportive choice, as evidence that you care enough to give them space to grow, as demonstration that you value them enough to postpone your own needs while they address whatever is preventing them from being available. But the time the avoidant claims to need is almost never spent doing genuine therapeutic work that would transform their capacity for intimacy. They are not in intensive therapy addressing their attachment wounds, not practicing vulnerability in safe contexts, not developing the skills that sustained relationship requires. They are simply living their life with less anxiety than they experienced when intimacy with you was activating their defenses, enjoying the relief that distance provides, while framing that relief as necessary space for growth that is not actually occurring. The avoidant wishes you would wait because your waiting allows them to avoid the consequence of their rejection, the consequence of losing you permanently. If you wait, they maintain the option to return when distance has regulated their nervous system enough that approaching you feels manageable again. They can have both the freedom from intimacy demands and the security of knowing you remain available when they decide they are ready. Your waiting eliminates the need for them to actually choose, to commit to either genuine transformation or accepting that their patterns make relationship with you impossible. When you refuse to wait, when you move forward with your own life and make it clear that their timeline for readiness is irrelevant to your timeline for building the life you want, the avoidant is confronted with the reality that their patterns have actual costs. They cannot have indefinite time to work on themselves while keeping you available for when they feel ready. They must face that asking you to wait is asking you to sacrifice your own well-being and opportunities for their comfort, that the time they claim to need is not actually producing the change they promise it will, that their request for patience is really a request for you to enable their avoidance indefinitely. The avoidant often becomes angry when you refuse to wait, accusing you of giving up too easily, of not caring enough to be patient, of proving through your unwillingness to wait that you never really valued them. This anger reveals that the avoidant believed you should sacrifice your own life and needs for their comfort, that your value was supposed to be demonstrated through waiting regardless of cost to yourself, that your refusal to wait is betrayal rather than reasonable choice to protect your own well-being and future. Number 7. They wish you would make the relationship ending entirely your decision so they can pursue you with clean conscience later. The avoidant wishes you would be the one to officially end the relationship after they have created conditions that make ending inevitable, would be the one to state clearly that you are done and moving on, would be the one who closes the door decisively, while they maintain plausible deniability about having wanted things to work out. This wish serves their need to avoid guilt about destroying the relationship, while preserving their ability to later claim they never wanted it to end and you were the one who gave up. The avoidant creates unbearable dynamic through their rejection and withdrawal, but stops short of stating definitively that the relationship is over forever. They leave ambiguity, suggest they need space rather than permanent ending, frame their withdrawal as temporary rather than final. This ambiguity positions you as the one who must make the definitive choice to end things completely, who must be the one to state clearly that the relationship cannot continue under these conditions, who must be the one to enforce the boundary that their behavior has made necessary. When you make that choice, when you state clearly that you cannot continue in relationship with someone who has rejected you or cannot show up consistently, the avoidant can later tell themselves and others that you were the one who ended things, that they would have kept trying if you had not given up, that the relationship failed because you made the choice to leave rather than because their patterns made the relationship unsustainable. This narrative protects their ego and allows them to approach you later with the framing that you made the decision to end things, and therefore the ending was not their fault or responsibility. The avoidant wishes you would make the ending your decision because it allows them to pursue you later without having to acknowledge they rejected you. They can reach out claiming they never wanted to lose you, that they were willing to keep working on things, that you were the one who decided the relationship was over. They can position themselves as the person trying to repair something you broke, rather than as the person who destroyed something valuable through their inability to sustain intimacy and is now returning, because the consequences of that destruction have become uncomfortable. When you refuse to be the one who officially ends things, when you maintain that they rejected you and their rejection is the ending unless they choose to undo it through genuine pursuit and changed behavior, the avoidant is forced to either commit to the rejection or explicitly reverse it. They cannot maintain the ambiguity that allows them to avoid responsibility for the relationship ending. They must either own that they chose to end things or demonstrate through genuine effort that they want to restore what their rejection destroyed. This clarity is unbearable for the avoidant because it eliminates their ability to have things both ways, to reject you while maintaining that they never wanted to lose you, to create the ending while making you responsible for enforcing it. The avoidant wants to control when the relationship ends and when it resumes while avoiding accountability for either choice. Wants to be the one who determines what happens while making you appear to be the one who made the decisions that led to those outcomes. Why their wishes? Reveal their dysfunction, rather than their feelings. What the avoidant wishes you would do after they reject you is not to evidence of deep feelings they struggle to express or complicated internal experience that makes intimacy difficult. Their wishes are evidence of severe attachment dysfunction, where they need you to enable their avoidance, to participate in patterns that serve their defensive system, to sacrifice your own well-being to manage their anxiety about vulnerability. Every wish they have about how you should respond to their rejection is wish that you would make their dysfunction more comfortable rather than requiring them to address it. The avoidant who genuinely cared about you and was capable of healthy relationship would never reject you while hoping you would pursue, would never want you to suffer just enough to feed their ego, would never expect you to wait indefinitely while they avoid doing actual work to become capable of showing up. The avoidant who genuinely cared would either commit to the relationship by addressing their patterns or commit to the ending by letting you go completely rather than keeping you invested while giving you nothing consistent in return. Understanding what the avoidant wishes you would do after they reject you protects you from interpreting their reactions to your healthy boundaries as evidence that you made wrong choice. When the avoidant becomes angry that you respected their rejection, hurt that you did not pursue them through their withdrawal, confused that you treated their stated desire for space as actual desire, rather than test you were supposed to fail by refusing to give them the space they claimed to need, these reactions are not evidence that you should have responded differently. They are evidence that the avoidant expected you to enable their dysfunction and is upset that you chose self-protection instead. The only healthy response to avoidant rejection is the response the avoidant desperately wishes you would not choose, respecting their stated boundary completely, accepting their rejection as the ending they communicated it to be, moving forward with your life rather than waiting for them to be ready, refusing to take responsibility for relationship ending when their patterns were the actual problem, establishing that their rejection eliminates your obligation to continue caring about their well-being in ways that cost you emotional energy. This response protects you from enabling patterns that would destroy you while potentially creating the only consequence that might motivate the avoidant toward genuine change. The consequence of losing someone who mattered because their patterns made relationship impossible, and the person they lost refused to make their patterns comfortable by pursuing through rejection or waiting indefinitely, or accepting blame for failure that actually belonged to the avoidant's unchanged attachment dysfunction. The profound freedom of doing the opposite of what they wish, choosing to do the opposite of what the avoidant wishes you would do after they reject you, creates profound freedom from patterns that would otherwise consume years of your life in dynamics that require your self-abandonment. When you respect their rejection instead of pursuing, when you refuse to remain available as backup while they explore other options, when you move forward with your life instead of waiting for them to be ready, you reclaim power over your own existence that the avoidance wishes would have you surrender to their comfort and control. The freedom comes from no longer organizing your life around someone else's dysfunction, from no longer sacrificing your needs to accommodate someone else's inability to show up, from no longer twisting yourself into shapes that make their patterns manageable while making your own well-being impossible. You discover that you can survive losing someone who rejected you, that your worth is not determined by whether someone with severe attachment wounds chooses you, that the pain of walking away from someone you care about is preferable to the slow death of enabling their avoidance while hoping they will somehow become capable of reciprocating your investment. Doing the opposite of what the avoidant wishes also teaches you to trust your own perceptions and boundaries, rather than constantly questioning whether you are being too harsh or unforgiving or rigid. The avoidant wishes you would doubt yourself, would question whether respecting their rejection is right choice, would wonder if pursuing them would demonstrate care they would eventually reciprocate. Your choice to trust that their rejection means what it states, to maintain boundaries even when maintaining them, makes the avoidant unhappy. To honor your own needs over their unspoken wishes reinforces your ability to make decisions that protect you even when those decisions are difficult. Most importantly, doing the opposite of what the avoidant wishes frees you from the impossible position of having to decode mixed messages and respond to desires that contradict stated boundaries. The avoidant creates situations where you cannot win, because winning requires knowing that their rejection is test rather than genuine ending, that their request for space means pursue me harder, that their claim not to want you means prove you want me enough to override my stated boundaries. Your refusal to play this game eliminates the crazy-making dynamic where you are supposed to violate their stated wishes to give them what they actually want. The freedom of doing the opposite is freedom to build life organized around your own values and needs, rather than around managing someone else's attachment wounds. You can pursue relationships with people capable of reciprocity, can invest energy in connections that do not require constant decoding of mixed signals, can experience what it feels like to be with someone who wants you in straightforward ways that do not require you to ignore their explicit rejections to demonstrate your care. This freedom is what the avoidance wishes would have stolen from you if you had chosen to honor those wishes rather than honoring yourself. Understanding that their rejection is information that protects you. The avoidance rejection, regardless of what they secretly wish you would do in response to it, is valuable information about their capacity for relationship that you should trust rather than trying to override through pursuit or patience, or accepting blame for their patterns. When someone tells you through their rejection that they cannot show up for you, that they need space from intimacy with you, that they are choosing to end connection rather than work through discomfort that genuine relationship generates, believing them is self-protection rather than giving up too easily. The rejection tells you that the avoidance nervous system cannot tolerate sustained intimacy with you. Without therapeutic intervention, they are not currently undertaking. It tells you that whatever you are asking for, consistency, emotional availability, genuine vulnerability, exceeds their current capacity, and they are choosing withdrawal over development of that capacity. It tells you that relationship with them would require you to continuously accommodate limitations that prevent the intimacy you need, that you would be doing all the work to maintain connection they cannot sustain, that you would be sacrificing your needs to make their dysfunction manageable. This information is gift, even though receiving it is painful. The avoidant is showing you clearly who they are and what they are capable of offering, is demonstrating through rejection that they cannot meet you where you need to be met, is proving through their choice to withdraw that they are not ready for the relationship you deserve. Your job is not to pursue them into readiness, or wait for capacity to develop or accept less than you need, because developing greater capacity is difficult for them. Your job is to trust the information their rejection provides and make choices that honor that information, rather than hoping it is inaccurate. The avoidant's secret wishes about how you should respond to their rejection are attempts to make you ignore the information the rejection provides, to convince you that their rejection means something other than what it clearly states, to get you to override your own perceptions with hope that pursuing or waiting or staying available will somehow transform their capacity. But their capacity does not transform through your accommodation. It transforms only through their own sustained therapeutic work, addressing the attachment wounds driving their patterns, work they are demonstrating through their rejection they are not currently doing. Trusting the rejection as accurate information about the avoidant's current capacity allows you to make informed decision about whether to invest in someone who has shown you they cannot reciprocate that investment. You can choose to protect yourself from patterns that would damage you increasingly over time, can refuse to enable dysfunction by making it comfortable through your pursuit or patience, can honor yourself by requiring that anyone who wants relationship with you be capable of showing up in ways the avoidance rejection proves they cannot currently sustain. The rejection is the truth about their capacity, and trusting that truth is trusting yourself enough to require reciprocity, rather than accepting one-sided dynamics that serve the other person's needs while destroying your own well-being.